How much more water is likely? How much more damage is possible? And how state and local governments are responding. With shipping at a standstill on the Arkansas, can we calculate the economic fallout? Flooded fairways are one thing, farm fields quite another, and we'll have an update. And also in this week's report, the impact on surface transportation. Will high water impact the highway agenda? Arkansas Week coming up.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week. A lot of Arkansas is underwater, and more of it will submerge before the flooding subsides. It impacts not only those lands and homes and businesses and farms and cities along the Arkansas River, but the entire state. The impact on Arkansas's gross domestic product can hardly be measured now. It is literally a fluid situation. But suffice it to say, it's already significant, especially considering that our crucial ag sector was struggling with soggy fields even before the latest rains, well before the river began rising. And highways, how much damage and at what cost? All of that our focus tonight. And we are joined up top tonight by A.J. Gary, Director of the Arkansas Department of Emergency Management, and Travis Justice, an economist with the Arkansas Farm Bureau. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming in. Director Gary, let's begin with you because it's shape-shifting almost with every hour. The estimates are on cresting. Can you bring us up to date at mid-morning Friday anyway? What can we expect in the next 24?
Sure. So the water has crested in Sebastian County and is continuing to move down. So it'll crest in Little Rock on, they're anticipating June 5th, and crest in Pine Bluff, Jefferson County around June 6th. We have been monitoring and preparing for this for even before the floods have come. In fact, the way we prepare in the state, we work very close with our county government. We have emergency managers in every county, and we train, we exercise for these types of disasters. And on this particular disaster, we started last week with coordination calls with all of our counties that we anticipated that would be affected. And we do those every day to try to stay ahead of this event as it goes down.
So the focus, to some extent, is shifting down, literally downstream.
Sure. Yes.
We're looking at a crest at Pendleton.
Yeah. Later on, of course, as it goes down, we anticipate keeping the Emergency Operations Center activated for at least another week in the response phase, and we're in the response phase right now of this event. So we're pushing resources, coordinating assets to the counties, to the locals as they need those. So they're calling them in, and we're getting, whether it's sandbagging or whether it's assistance on, blocking some roadways and so forth. So we're continuously working those.
Yeah,
those
the economic impact isn't necessarily your portfolio, but it is obviously going to be substantial from your observations.
Absolutely, yes, there's no doubt about that. We flew to Sebastian County. I was with the governor yesterday, and you could really see the impact all the way up the river, from Little Rock all the way up. You could start, seeing some of that impact especially on the agricultural section.
Well, again, as we go to press at mid-morning Friday, we've had one levee collapse or be breached. What is your assessment now? Does the agency have an assessment?
Yeah, so we've had a report of a breach in Yell County, and we have resources there with the county, and they're doing what they can to kind of slow that water and block that area. This is going to be a long event. It's a record-breaking event for our river, and our levees are going to be under a lot of pressure for quite a few days to come. So, and there's a lot of unknowns because it is a record flood.
On to the economics of it. Travis Justice, this was a pretty damp year for Arkansas ag already.
Oh yes, it's been extremely wet since last fall, all winter, and now continuing into spring. So we had, record moisture levels, and then on top of the most recent rains, and then the flood events. So there's, most rain this fall has nowhere to go but run off, and so that's what we've seen is the accumulation of the wet weather for the last 6 months has culminated in helping contribute to this flood event. And so there's been pressure on the ag community in some circles, and then particularly this spring with the crops, for example, with the weekly rains has really interrupted the normal planting schedule, and so we've been struggled to find dry weather to at least get this year's crop in, and a lot have done that. But now, particularly those lowlands along the river, a lot of those crops are now going underwater, and so those crops, some will be destroyed, some may have a chance to be to recover, but will require replanting, and so additional costs built in. So, and it's hard to put a total estimate because this event is still occurring, and so we're not sure we can get it's hard to get an acreage assessment because the acres grow each day, and then the high water hasn't reached Little Rock yet, and then so you got southeast Arkansas that's still in jeopardy with this high weather as this flood moves on. So it's an emerging event. We know it will be, I don't want to put a number on it. It'll be millions of dollars, but it's hard to assess right now because it's still happening. But we do know, in addition to just crop loss and impacts on the current production agriculture, you got property loss. Homes are underwater. Particularly, and then on ag lands, you got the actual crop, but then you've got debris removal, fences and others, washouts, and so you'll have property damage other than just the growing crop in the field that will have to be, it's hard to assess now because it's still underwater, but after that assessment is made, it will be significant.
Yeah, and let me go back to Director Gary for just a second. Do you have, at least in West Arkansas, any sort of damage estimate yet in terms of residential, commercial?
Sure. So we're still in the recovery phase of this. Governor Hutchinson has requested an emergency declaration from the president. That was approved last night. I got word of that approval last night. Also, Governor Hutchinson has put now up to $350,000 towards the recovery part of state funding, and that's helping us to get resources in. This emergency declaration will help us bring additional federal resources in for the recovery.
Still 15 counties, I believe.
For the response. Yeah, I think that's right. Okay. Basically all the counties along the river. But we're in the response phase right now. When we get into the recovery phase, we'll get those cost estimates on homes and that. We're actually trying to do that a little bit quicker in this disaster. A tornado goes through, it's real quick, you immediately see what that damage is. And flooding, it takes a while for that water to go down. We have been working with Civil Air Patrol, with the National Guard, Corps of Engineers on doing some photographing of the river and the damage. So we can see early on the impact it has on some of our homes in those areas. So we're able to take that information and we're going to try to start the recovery phase a little bit earlier because we'll be able to look at those and tell the impact of it. Work with FEMA. They've been in the Emergency Operations Center with us, and we can get an estimate on that damages, and that will then help us lead to a federal declaration on the recovery side where we could get additional federal funds in.
Yeah, Travis Justice. Well, both gentlemen, there's been a moratorium or an embargo, a halt to barge traffic on the Arkansas for several days. Any number of barges now in Slackwater harbors or otherwise sheltered, which presents its own economic complication.
Yes, particularly for the ag community, we have products that move, both farm products as well as farm product supplies, and one of the more particular issues currently is, we have a lot of fertilizer being shipped on the river, and so we're seeing some real shortages of fertilizer availability out here in certain sectors of farm country because the normal flow of that input item has been disrupted. And then plus in those areas that they might be underwater, but they've experienced heavy rains, and some of the fields have been faced with having to replant. So we anticipate a really significant amount of replanting going on, which is adding additional demand for additional input items, of which there's strain on supply anyway. And so it's creating the interruption of normal barge traffic and other transport of farm input items is certainly adding to the delays or inconvenience and cost of putting in that crop this year. And so it's not only impacting the actual production, but also the cost of that production as well.
The farm community was already having to cope with trade and tariff wars. Now you've got, even before the first raindrops fell, now you've got this on top of that.
Yeah, it's been, it's a little, somewhat of a double whammy. Yes, the trade issues and concerns and all that, of course, that impacts the price that farmers has been a price depressing effect for certain commodities. And so now you add the weather impacts, which is going to add to the cost side. So, the typical cost price squeeze is hitting really from both sides for certain sectors of our farm community. And so it's going to be a long recovery period here. And then, of course, depends on how the weather, Mother Nature treats us, and then how some of the trade disputes are resolved on what the future may hold for any kind of price recovery in some of our commodity sectors.
All right. A.J. Gary, what's the next step for your agency?
Well, we're continuing to work with the counties and fill in those resources, those requests for resources from the locals. Governor Hutchinson has been great. Everything that I've asked for that's come up, he's approved immediately. We've been in constant contact since the beginning of this, and again with all of our state agencies. I've been told that this is the first time that we've had all of our state emergency support functions represented in the Emergency Operations Center. And I think that says a couple of things. One, how well the team here in Arkansas works together, and two, the significance of this event, that it's going to take all of us, state, federal, city, and county, working together to get us through this. And we're in for the long haul.
Well, in the very near term, though, we've got the disaster declaration or request for additional emergency declaration anyway. How soon does that assistance arrive?
Well,
from D.C.
Yeah, actually, that is again FEMA. We've had a FEMA team here in our EOC from the very beginning. They got in the big team got in this weekend, but we had a couple of other FEMA personnel there even before that team got there. So those resources are there. We're using the Corps of Engineers. So this emergency declaration will help cover the funding for some of those federal resources that we have brought in already, and will continue to task with stuff. So it's not like they haven't been here. They have been here with us from the beginning, and it's been a great coordination and cooperation with our state, local, and federal partners. And that's been very huge for this type of disaster.
Travis, just a few seconds from me.
Well, once we have a better assessment of the ag impact, it requires that emergency declaration for any other assistance that might follow for crop loss or disaster assistance, if you will. It requires that initial emergency declaration to trigger all that. So not only the humanitarian and the public support areas, even in the ag area, requires that emergency declaration, which I'm sure we'll receive. But then, so any other disaster relief or assistance that may come, of course we have to have an estimate, but we may need that declaration to start with. And so,
all right, Travis Justice, A.J. Gary, gentlemen, thank you very much for being part of the program.
Thank you.
Bring us up to date. Back now with more on this week's big story. Scott Bennett is director of the Arkansas Department of Transportation, or should I say Mr. Secretary, whatever, under the reorganization.
Still director. We weren't affected.
An independent agency, of course. Let me start, sir, with the weather damage. Has the department even begun? Are you even in a position yet to make an assessment of how much damage?
We are not. We are not. And a lot of the damage is still to come. This has been described as a slow-moving disaster. So the roads that are underwater so far, we're not able to get to and assess the damage, and we're positive that there will be more to come. So we may be 3 to 4 weeks out from actually being able to assess the complete amount of damage that we're going to have.
Well, from the scope of the flooding thus far and what the experts, the hydrologists, tell us is likely to happen, even a ballpark figure, it's obviously it's going to be significant, or am I wrong?
No, you're not going to be wrong at all. Some people have said this may be the most costly disaster in the state. A lot of it is even going to be beyond the transportation system. I mean, right now, I think the governor said that the economic loss just from river traffic is about $23 million a day. And then you're going to have homes and other structures that are going to have significant damage. And we'll have to inspect the roads, clean them up, inspect the bridges once all the water recedes, and see what the damage is there, and we have no way of knowing what that estimate is at this time.
Fair to judge that maybe just some entire rebuilding is going to be under.
That's extremely possible. That's extremely possible. I mean, the rate at which the water is flowing could cause some damage to bridges. That would be the most costly. This could cause some damage to roads that would require them to be rebuilt at the most, or at the very least be required to have a lot of repair done to them.
Yeah, again, with insufficient data so far, how is this going to impact the department's budget for the balance of this fiscal and the next?
Well, you're exactly right. This will probably go into the next fiscal year, which starts in July. We're hopeful from that aspect that the president does declare this a federal disaster area, and that would allow us to receive some federal reimbursement for the damage done to the transportation system. But the thing that everybody has to remember about that is we still have to pay up front for all the repairs, and then wait for Congress to appropriate the money for the reimbursement. So it could have a significant impact on our maintenance budget at the very least, and that could mean that some of the things that we would typically take care of this summer, sealing roads, overlaying roads, may have to be delayed for a little while.
Yeah, again, with the water even some days away from cresting, certainly down at Pendleton anyway. Is it even possible for you to put together a timeline on when the inspection process can be?
No, and it'll all depend on the extent of the water and when the water recedes. But as soon as the water has receded to a level that the roads are clear from the water, we'll be able to get our crews in there just as quickly as possible, because we do want to open everything up as soon as we can. So parts of it may be 2 weeks, parts of it may be this time next month.
Shifting gears slightly, you had a good legislative session.
We did.
Well,
yes.
In tandem with the governor's office, you've got a $300 million program out there, 2/3 of it, though, subject to voter ratification next year.
That's true.
Looking at frankly, at the political climate right now and the economic climate right now, how difficult a sales job is that going to be?
I believe when we show the people what we could accomplish with the amount of revenue that would be flowing based on voter approval, that will take precedent over whatever the economic climate is. And we have to remember that it's really not an increase in the tax burden on the people. It's a continuation of a half-cent sales tax that they are already paying. So it's not an increase in the tax burden, but it will allow us to continue a lot of the progress. And I think the key is going to be putting together the program and be able to educate the people on what all will be accomplished throughout the state. And that should lead to success at the polls.
Hey, do you have a timeline on putting a plan out there that people can take a look at?
Well, sure.
You and the commission.
Yes. We're working on a draft of that plan right now to present to the commission and to the governor, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to release it to the public this fall. And then as the election gets closer next year, we'll be making our rounds around the state, civic clubs, chambers of commerce. We're talking about hosting regional meetings in different areas of the state to be able to educate the public, and that'll be a big part of our effort after the beginning of the year. But yes, we think we'll be able to release that plan to the public this fall.
Will the focus be, can you tell us, will the focus be on M&O, maintenance and operation, or new construction?
There's going to be a good balance. Now, the first part of the governor's highway plan that passed, the revenue will begin to flow this fall. That money is statutorily designated to maintenance type activities, overlays, repair and reconstruction of bridges. That's about $95 million a year. Now, the rest of it that would come from the half-cent sales tax that will be voted on in November of 2020, there are no restrictions on it. So we believe we're going to have a good balance of additional overlay type jobs, bridge improvements, and some more capital type projects to continue some of the widening projects that we've had around the state to relieve capacity or to relieve congestion and to continue to connect different parts of the state with 4-lane highways. Obviously,
The most controversial project now is 30 Crossing through downtown Little Rock. Now there's litigation. What's the potential there for a significant delay? Odds would seem significant anyway.
Well, you might think so, but we believe that we have dotted all of our I's and crossed all of our T's. We did delay the project from our original schedule to do some more detailed environmental studies, some more detailed traffic studies, to work with the public. I mean, we've had more public involvement on this project than any project that we've ever had in the state. We believe we have a good plan, a solid plan put together that really talks about what the impacts are and what the impacts are not. And it's a pretty good plan that we believe will hold up in court. So we don't think the delay will be substantial. I know part of the suit is to try to stop everything until the suit is over. But we think we've done a good enough job on the front end that our work will be able to continue while the litigation process takes place.
And how much room for revision is there? Significant revision.
Well, when you talk about significant revision, you really have to look at whether you can revise it and still have the positive impact on mobility and efficiency of traffic flow. We believe that working with the public, working with the local elected officials, we have the most efficient plan in place right now.
All right, one final question, when it goes back to dollars and cents. The odds, it would appear, in retrospect anyway, for an infrastructure plan out of Washington, D.C. it never appeared just especially bright, and now they're not very bright at all. They're pretty dim. Or would you concur? What's your assessment?
I would, and I think Washington is just like some of the states around the country have been in the past. I believe everyone knows that there is an issue and you need to invest more money in infrastructure. The $1 trillion question right now is, how do you generate that amount of revenue?
Used to be $2 trillion, but
used to be, well, that's exactly right. How do you generate that amount of revenue? And there is not consensus on that. And what has happened over the last few years is more and more of the states have seen that and know that we can't continue to just rely on Washington to provide federal funds for infrastructure in the state. And there have been more and more states that have been passing their own infrastructure plans, just like we've just done. So if they do pass an infrastructure plan, that's really a bonus. We'll be able to make even more progress. But in lieu of that, we think with the state package, we'll be able to make significant progress on our own.
Scott Bennett, Director of the Department of Transportation, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And that's our broadcast for this week. We'll see you next week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR FM 89.